Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Shrink Chats. I'm Monica Burton.
And I'm Annette Reiter, and we're here today with our special guest, Laurie Elbow. She's a licensed mental health counselor and the Director of Clinical Services with Suncoast Center. And today we really want to talk about it's Suicide Prevention Month. So we want to talk about suicide prevention, the warnings, signs, myths, what you might want to know and think about and look at. And we want to try to make this as pleasurable a topic as possible, but also super helpful. So Laurie, thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about your work at Suncoast.
Thanks for having me. I've been here at Suncoast for 17 years, and our organization is over 75 years old. So
Wow.
We're in Pinellas County, Florida. We do behavioral health services, so counseling, psychiatric care, case management, and we also do all the sexual assault and child abuse exams for our county. So by default from doing that work, we're doing a lot of trauma counseling and trauma work.
And you're also part of this zero suicide prevention plan. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Really, our community came together a number of years ago now around the data for suicide in our county, and we were the third leading county in our state for deaths by suicide. And we were all shocked because population-wise, we're not the third largest, and we really wanted to take a look at how people were dying in our community and intervene in an area that we could. Sometimes you think of car crashes and other causes of death. You don't really feel like, oh, I have an ability to intervene. But being in behavioral health and doing this work day in and day out and realizing we had so many people who were dying by suicide seemed like an epidemic that no one was paying attention to, and that we really wanted to gather around together, understand it, make sure our workforce was prepared, and come up with some tangible ways to really move that number to lower.
To zero.
It's to zero.
Yeah. Hence the name, right?
It's also a national, you had said earlier, it's a national initiative as well.
Yes, and
right?
The information that they provide for communities and organizations to come together to end suicide is really useful. There's a lot of technical assistance. There's a lot of data, media guides, those kinds of things, workforce surveys, things that everyone can do at no cost to look at how they can make an impact in this area.
And
sorry. Is that a website, or is there a place like people could go get that data? Is that Zero Suicide something?
Yeah, if you look for Zero Suicide, I'm not sure if it's zerosuicide.com or what
.org or something. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to find.
We will get that information and post that on our Facebook and Instagram account so people can look into that and get that information. Part of what we wanted to do today is just talk about, especially with COVID, and I don't know if your numbers have increased at your agency, but what we're reading about and even seeing in our practices is an increased number of people who have suicide ideation, who are being Baker acted in our county, and even the numbers of people who are calling into the crisis line have increased. And so we want to help people understand that if you're feeling this way, here's what you do. Or if you have a loved one, children, teenagers I know are also really feeling this. So if you have a loved one that you're worried about, here's what you do. So if we could kind of talk about that for a little while.
Sure. I think one of the most important pieces of resources right now is that there was a CDC survey the last week in June. And that survey really identified the increase in mental health symptoms. And I feel like it also identified some particular populations that are important for us to keep in mind. So essential workers, people from racial and ethnic minority groups, young adults, and then unpaid caregivers of adults were really groups that identified disproportionate amount of distress. But overall, I think what they identified was increased symptoms of depression and anxiety. So a lot of people have a sense of what those are, but some people, maybe if they haven't had help before or haven't reached out, they might not identify those quite as easily. I think a lot of people talk about sleep, more need for sleep, feeling fatigued, feeling like you're never getting enough sleep is one of the indicators I tend to talk about for depression. And anxiety, I feel like it's kind of the panic and worry and sometimes feeling it in your body that people don't recognize. So increased heart rate, rapid breathing, feeling like you've had a bunch of caffeine even though you haven't. Those kind of things are how I try to describe that for people. I don't know if there's other ways you guys are having people come forward and identify those.
Wow, Laurie, you're speaking to, like, you're singing my client's song right now and a little bit of my own, right? The sleep one particularly, I mean, even when I go up and down the aisles of like drugstores, I've noticed like all the holistic sleep aids are like kind of like toilet paper gone, just gone from the shelves, or limit one practically. They probably need to put a sign there. So I know people are trying every, over-the-counter sleep aid they can find, melatonin and the likes of it, trying to find, obviously, by just looking at the shelves. That's what's missing in kind of the vitamin nutrition section. And I'm certainly not advocating that. I'm just saying I'm seeing that, and I'm hearing that a lot too, which can lead to both depression and anxiety symptoms. When you don't have sleep enough, then you get that your adrenal glands click in to kind of help you stay awake and function through the day. And that's your kind of hyper arousal where you're having all that anxiety looking like symptoms. Caffeine, I drank a pot of coffee. Stuff. Yeah. So I hear you. And so I think what's important to know is that perhaps if we can catch it when it's anxiety and depression and not let it get exasperated, that's really the time to be talking to your doctor or the pediatrician. If you have one, getting a telehealth, this is worthy of speaking to someone, and then possibly getting a referral to therapy.
Right, and I know I get asked the question all the time, like, how bad does it have to be? And it doesn't have to be bad. You can call someone, you can have a conversation with someone who knows and understands these conditions, and even if it's not meeting a threshold of a diagnosis, you can have that conversation about just not feeling well and just not sleeping well. Those are worth seeking help if you have access. So
right, I think it's understanding that a lot of times stress can present itself through through physical symptoms. So like you're saying, lack of sleep, anxiety can sometimes hit in our stomach. So I'm seeing a lot of GI issues. And we're, reading about that as well. And to really communicate to people who are listening, guys, it's okay to call your doctor and just say, hey, this is what's going on with me. And it's especially okay to also reach out to a therapist. Part of what we were talking about before we started recording is just, even in 2020, people are still not so sure about contacting a therapist. And please know that right now, especially, we all need help. And it's okay to ask for help. And the crisis line, there's a suicide prevention hotline that's free, and it's 24/7. It's 1-800-273-8255. And you can call that at any time if you just want to talk to someone about what's going on. Or the text line 741-741, and just text talk, and they'll text you back. And if you're just feeling off, it's okay to reach out to a doctor, to a religious leader, to a therapist, or call one of these hotlines to talk about what's going on and to see how we can be helpful. Agency settings, if do you guys have, there is a local hotline number for Pinellas County, is that right?
Yeah, that's a 727-791-3131. And the 800 number is answered locally too in your area. So depending on how big of a population and the funding. So here in Pinellas County, there are 2 local agencies that answer that hotline. So either way, you're going to get to the right place.
Mm-hmm.
In the last week, I've had 2 new clients come in and tell me, one on the phone before we made the appointment and then one in person, felt like bad, that they were coming in because it wasn't bad enough.
Yeah.
And they were worried that they were taking away from an hour that somebody else who might need it more should be using. So I just want to tell people it's just not true. Not for my practice. If I can't get you in, I'll find you a therapist. I will make referrals to lots of therapists. We can find you someone to talk to. And I think this is just, I don't know what you 2 think. Just, can I chat a little bit about a topic here? Like, I feel like with, the advent of all these over-the-counter medications, we're all becoming our own doctors, so to speak. So, we're prescribing our own whatever, ibuprofen or whatever we're taking. And to the point that, it's almost like we've devalued the idea that it's okay to talk to someone. Like, oh, you should be able to figure this out on your own, and why bother anyone? And until it's super bad, please don't come to me when it's super bad. I mean, it's okay, but you can come earlier. It's a little bit easier for me to, you might not need therapy as long. So I don't know. I just have felt like the culture has moved more and more to this concept of I can handle it all on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you were bringing up a good point around, it's not as bad as someone else. I've heard this term ambiguous grief, and
Yes.
It's been my soapbox that it's like it's not ambiguous. Like, it is really not. There are real things that people have lost, that they are missing people that they have contact with, and they're missing activities, and they're missing people who are maybe gone from their life. And those are real losses. And while we might have been holding it together for a little bit of time, that you could talk to someone about those, and that could be helpful to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really important for people to know.
I also say to people, don't minimize your pain, grief, suffering. It's yours. And once we get into this comparison trap, in my opinion, that also kind of fuels the anxiety or depression. And then we get stuck in this, well, mine's not as bad, but it's still, we're still suffering. And so to say, like, don't compare, and also don't stuff it.
Yeah.
And that we are all people, we are all human beings, and we hit roadblocks. And that's why it's always good to ask for help instead of, it is good to be your own advocate. And at the same time, part of your advocacy is to say, I need help. And so I'm going to reach out and ask, because I'm not an expert in everything, and so to be clear. So again, guys, we're all kind of struggling through in different ways, struggling through the impact of the coronavirus and how it's really accelerated, relationship discord, anxiety, depression, and just that like stuck feeling. And so it's, part of this episode is to say, you might say, I just want this all to go away. And when we start to feel that way, here's how we can reach out and ask for help. Or if you notice your kids are not, doing well and they're a little off, here's what you can do. Call the suicide, give out the suicide hotline number, call your local agencies, call a therapist, start talking about it. The more you talk about it, the more we can kind of, in some ways, normalize that it's okay to feel this way. It's not okay to stay stuck in feeling this way.
And Annette brought up the empty shelves and people finding ways to cope and deal. And I think we would be remiss to not talk about alcohol and substances. I mean, I know the alcohol sales rising because bars are closed, and people think that that's a quick fix for sleep. And in truth, there's such a rebound effect that it is not very effective for sleeping. And, you get in cycles that maybe you weren't in before and are impacted by alcohol and substance use during this time. and paying attention to that in the people close to you and yourself is really important, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw a meme, and this is not funny, but it was like a packed stadium picture from past times, and on it it said the first AA meeting in 2021. So it's kind of making a sad joke about, but I do think we all have to be careful as therapists in assessing this, but also just as friends, like, are we colluding or encouraging friends and families to drink too much?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we using it too much as a coping mechanism? You know, can you get together and have iced tea, and instead of, you know, a happy hour Zoom, can you have an iced tea Zoom? Is it okay to just, you know, do some other things and socialize? Like, you know, a lot of people didn't drink every single night, and we find that more and more people during the pandemic are having a cocktail when that was not part of their nightly routine, because first of all, they were so busy taking their kids to soccer or whatever, right? With their, you know, we used to have all these busy lives, but they also prevented us from, you know, getting all down in the dumps and like, okay, the only thing that's going to feel good right now is to have a drink or a cocktail. So monitoring that and thinking about that truthfully and earnestly. And what are you modeling for the next generation in your home or your nieces and nephews? The only way to deal with boredom is to have a cocktail.
Right.
Yoga is good too.
Or the only way to connect. I mean, some people, that's the like, hey, now we're going to do this together, you know, and it's like, there are many things you could do together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Thanks, Laurie, for clear, you know, making that a strong point. And just, we have to look at that, these ambiguous losses. I love that term again to use. I'm glad you brought that up. They're not so ambiguous. They're real. Yeah. They're real things. Our whole lives, the way they used to be before this pandemic, are just not the same way. As much as we try to make little pieces and little slivers of them feel and smell and taste the same way, they're not the same way. And that's fair for that to be difficult and hard, and not to have to compare that to, it's not hard enough to talk to someone and get a little help, you know.
Someone brought up yesterday, it's only Tuesday, so Monday, that it's been 6 months, at least in Florida, since we've been quarantined. And how, like, that to me, when they said that was just a pause of like, wow, you know, 6 months. So it isn't ambiguous. A lot has changed in 6 months, and none of us thought we would be here, you know. And so it's that importance of this might be hitting a lot of people. Like 6 months, half the year has gone by that we have been in quarantine. So it's like, okay, you know, let's take a step back and really think about how this has impacted us, even from a mental health standpoint.
And I think in the beginning we were doing so much of in a few weeks, when we're back to normal, when we go to the new normal, when like the language evolved with what we thought was coming. And now, you know, people are in different places with understanding what that future might be, and dealing with it not being so certain. And so that's, you know, there's a wide range of how people see that, and recognizing that how people see it might be helpful to them, and it might be holding them back. It might be a thing that they want to spend some time talking about. Not necessarily that the therapist will have the answer for that. I know exactly what it's going to be in another 6 months now. None of us quite have that. So. Right.
Well, let's take a quick break and thank our sponsors, and check us out on Instagram and Facebook and social media. And we are here today with our wonderful guest, Laurie Elbow. She is helping us talk about suicide in the pandemic, and she is kind of an expert. So we want to hear more back about the myths and what's going on with families. Thank you so much.
Chosen by leading interventionists, doctors, and therapists, Origin's nationally accredited world-renowned addiction treatment programs provide comprehensive care for adults, including those with serious psychiatric and medical disorders. Call 844-502-HOPE to speak confidentially with an expert or visit us at origensrecovery.com to learn more.
Shrinks Chat is proudly sponsored by St. Petersburg Therapy, providing counseling for individuals, couples, and groups for over 20 years. Now offering the convenience of telemed, online meeting for your health and safety. For more information, visit online at stpetersburgtherapy.com.
Monica Burton is a licensed marriage and family therapist based in St. Petersburg, Florida, with over 17 years of experience. Monica offers individual, family, and couples therapy, and during this time of COVID-19 is offering teletherapy. Monica invites you to check out her YouTube channel, where she offers great tips and advice on relationships, parenting, family health, resolving conflict, and coping with stress. Go to YouTube to find Monica Burton LMFT. There are new segments every Thursday. Or check out Monica's website at monicaburtonlmft.com.
What if you could train your brain to think healthier thoughts? Cope Notes uses daily text messages to help you do exactly that. All you need is a cell phone and a brain. To learn more and try it for yourself, visit www.copenotes.com.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our episode on suicide prevention. Thanks again, Laurie, for being here and talking to us today. So let's talk a little bit about some myths of suicide and how to get some help if we're feeling down, or if we notice someone that we care about might be feeling down.
I think one of the most important ones, and one of the reasons we chose to do our work with the Zero Suicide Initiative, was that some people are just going to kill themselves. That if they make their mindset on they're ending their life, that there's no way that you can prevent that. And the truth is, all suicides are preventable. So there's this combination of the underlying conditions and what's going on for someone, but also impulsivity that comes into play. So really being tuned into being able to help someone who is in a hopeless, helpless place is very important. If you're worried, ask. That's not going to put the idea in somebody's mind. It will give you an opportunity to hear what they have to say. And I find that people respond either affirmatively or negatively kind of right away. And it gives you a chance to continue the conversation. And if someone responds affirmatively and you need help and assistance, you can call the hotline, you can call 911. So I think those are the big ones I really like to point out, this idea that suicide is preventable in all cases, and that asking does not put it in someone's head.
So
that's so important. I want to just emphasize that again for people out there, because I hear this all the time, that from parents. I'm afraid to ask my kid about this. I hear, they seem down, but I don't want to ask, because what if that's what makes them want to do it? Or what if they never had thought about it, and because I asked, if your kid's a teenager in middle school or high school, they've already heard about suicide. You won't be the person that first brought it up. You'll be, number 10 or number 100. So you can ask those questions, and that's not going to make your kid kill themselves. That's going to help them know they can talk to you, that you're a safe place, and to reach out. So, I'm overemphasizing that, I know, but I know our listeners are wondering that. And same with your friends. You're not going to lose a friend who's not feeling good about themselves by asking this question. You may get a better friend. So being brave and courageous, because can be a taboo subject in many cultures, and particularly ours, to even bring it up. So if listeners are out there wondering about that, that's just unheard of, that this causes it. It's not.
There's a really good training too for lay people, for anyone. Mental health first aid is really good for learning about mental health conditions, but also learning how to ask that question for needing to intervene when someone is feeling that way. So there's lots of local folks who are offering mental health first aid, and they offer it for young adults and adults as well. So.
Is that through your agency, or just that's another, like, just?
No, that's a national.
Okay.
And some local organizations, NAMI, our school system, have offered those trainings.
Okay. That's great.
We'll get those and put them on our website and Facebook page too. I'm making note of that for later for listeners out there who are looking for that information. If you're not quickly writing it down during the podcast, it'll be out there.
And just out of curiosity, I'm going to open the door. You had said earlier that one of the higher risk groups is our racial or ethnic groups. And also, you know, that if you notice that someone might be feeling suicidal, to call 911. And right now that that might not mix, you know, and that can be really scary for, you know, some in the Black community. If my kid is feeling suicidal, I'm not going to want to call the police. So, you know, what are some other options, or are there some other options really to say there is still help out there if you are, you know, not white, and here's how to access those help so it's not as scary.
Using the hotline is a good first step. We also, here in Pinellas County, we have a mobile crisis response team. So this is a team of people who do a screening on the phone and can show up in person to assess whether or not someone needs to be hospitalized. Not all people who are feeling suicidal need to go to the hospital. That's not the right intervention for every single person who's feeling suicidal. So I think that's important to kind of say out loud. Many times people can contract for safety. You know, a safety plan is a really important tool. A lot of our community agencies are using the same safety plan so that we can communicate if a person moves from one organization to another about who is a protective factor for that person, what kinds of activities and resources they have access to. And that contracting for safety also often includes assessing for lethal means. So is this a person who has access to firearms or other means that they intend to use to harm themselves? So a person who's willing to contract for safety, have someone help them remove those kinds of things from their environment and from their access can really do a lot towards working towards keeping them in the community, not in a hospital setting. So.
A lot of the churches in Southern Pinellas are more densely populated with Black members, and I know a lot of their pastors and ministers and reverends and fathers try to make their churches kind of safe places and resources, but does your agency work with any particular affiliation with any of the religious groups down in South County?
No, in particular, we've done a lot of, some of them have done weekend trainings and events for parishioners especially when there's been an event within their community. So we have participated in some of those. And, you know, we have staff who are and attend different churches and groups and are connected in that way. So.
That's great.
Yeah. I think it's a good first step for families too, to reach out to their church. Oftentimes churches will have a counselor that works at the church that they can, you know, deploy. Like, you know, if you're not going to call 911 and you're really getting concerned, you need to take steps no matter what race you are to get help. Right. And it's okay to ask for help. And so oftentimes religious groups are great first starts, you know, rather than just staying isolated and alone and feeling like you have no support. There is community support out there.
Right. And there's also, you know, agencies, you know, accept most insurance, most private practitioners, or not most, but some private practitioners also accept insurance. So if you're worried about cost and you do have insurance, call your insurance company. I know some insurance companies, at least through the COVID, actually when it took the copays away, so people who maybe was nervous about even paying their $30 copay they weren't responsible for that anymore. So please call your insurance. Or Laurie, I don't know if you guys at Suncoast have like a sliding scale.
We do, yeah. We take Medicaid, Medicare, a lot of commercial insurances, and we also have resources for victims of crime and some other special population groups. And I did want to point out one of the things that we use a lot is there's a safety plan app on your phone. And so, yeah, we have we try to tell a lot of our clients about the safety plan app, and it's got different sections for warning signs and coping skills. And yeah, so it gives you an opportunity to kind of put that in your phone and have it close to you at all times. And whether you're starting by kind of filling that in and then going and working with someone or vice versa, it's a good resource to have. So
That's great. That's
and
good
it's just
to know.
a blue little cross called safety plan. So,
Okay.
Like an X cross or a plus sign cross?
a plus sign cross.
Okay. I need visualizations, Laurie. Help me out.
Yeah. And I'm not sure, a lot of the resources, honestly, that we're using across agencies were developed by the VA, who did a lot of research and a lot of background and practice work in some of the tools that they use. So I don't know if that's where this one came from or not. So.
So I know we're talking a little bit about Pinellas County, but also Laurie, you are highlighting that a lot of the research is being done nationally. So if you're listening in Missouri or Oregon, or call your local agencies, or the national, NAMI is a national organization that does educate with mental health, initiatives. So please don't be afraid to call. And in fact, even to our listeners that are our international listeners, there are ways to access help out there. And we've posted those resources before, so we'll post those again.
Yeah, scroll back through the Facebook page for sure. And you'll probably find some more information if you need more help. I think one of the better myths that the two that you've dispelled already about that it's preventable, and that, that we can prevent it if we catch it early enough. And then that also, if you bring it up, you're going to cause it somehow by talking about it. You're going to make the person do it because you brought it up. I mean, it almost feels like that, don't step on a crack, you'll break your mother's back type. Are there any other myths around this that you see kind of more regularly, since you deal with this topic a little bit more than maybe Monica and I do daily?
Well, I think one that is important to mention is this idea that if you have suicidal thoughts, that there's a mental health condition. And there might be symptoms, there might be some indication that there's trauma or some other thing going on. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily the case. So I think it's important to remember that, it would be a sign, it's a thing to talk about, but it's not suicidal thoughts mean you have a mental health condition. So
Good point. I think sometimes, like when I've had the flu, I don't have the flu for anyone listening, but when I've had it in years past, you just get so sick and you have so many body aches at the I get to this place where I kind of wish I was dead. I'm kind of literally, God, take me now. This is, 10 days of just feeling like my bones are cracking just as I lay in my warm, comfortable bed. It's, so sometimes pain, chronic pain, chronic illness, these can make people, sometimes having a thought like, I wish I was dead, is a sign of that might be a sign that something else is going on that needs attention, maybe medical attention, maybe some support in different ways, maybe even surgical, or you're just not feeling good for a long period of time. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're mentally ill and you have a definite DSM diagnosis. So I think you're making a good point that this is stuff that all of us have experienced. When you've had lots of pain or chronic pain, you probably have wished, or when you've had a horrible job and you've had to work it, you've probably had a thought, I wish I wasn't living. And that's not
sometimes a new chronic diagnosis, a medical diagnosis is one of the things that triggers it for people. So.
Well, I also think, to your point, Laurie, relationship discord can create those feelings when you're really feeling like a lot of stuff is out of your control. You know, those feelings can come in of like, oh, I just want this all to go away. I just want this to stop. So again, it doesn't have to be attached to a mental health diagnosis. And sometimes it is, you know, and that's another reason why it's, you know, it's okay to ask for help, guys. You know, we're here to help kind of weed out what's going on and to help you through it instead of you feeling like you have to stay stuck in it.
Right. And you don't have to have a mental health diagnosis to be able to sit in a therapist's office and talk over some things,
right,
and get some tips and get help. I mean, therapists are here to, this is all we do. We love looking at puzzles and figuring out how, if you think differently or you act differently or you behave differently, you'll get a different feeling and result in your life. So it's kind of a fun exploration for us. And it's our job and our work. And no, we don't get bored. We don't hate all your conversation. Aren't you sick? I mean, almost daily, what some client of mine says to me, how do you do this all day? Listen to other people's problems. Are you sick of us? And I'm like, no, I'm not sick of you. This is my job. I love doing my job.
It's really inspiring. Much of the time you hear how people are surviving and they're thriving and the things they've overcome and the ways that they figured out how to get along and make the world work for them if they're, you know, they don't feel like they exactly fit in. And I mean, that's really inspiring day to day.
Yeah. So I think one of the main things we've been talking about here in this last part is how to prevent it, is to catch it early, to catch it when it's just that early thought, and talk with someone, your family member, your friends, and then also to get professional consultation as needed to get support and kind of, you know, keep your mind healthy and keep your thoughts healthy.
Yeah. There's a lot of help out there. There's a lot of people, and more people, you know, that mental health first aid training I talked about, more and more people are becoming aware and capable and competent to help. You know, we have law enforcement who are receiving training. We have teachers who are receiving training. You know, I think our capacity for assisting is just going to get greater and greater over time.
Yeah, I think locally the Pinellas County Police Department is putting out like 23 trained clinical social workers or mental health counselors in October and November out into rotation. So this is some really great, inspiring things that are changing in our, you know, our frontline workers that are out there talking to people firsthand. So this is good news and good stuff. So I can't thank you enough for all the work you guys do over there at Suncoast and how you're helping the community.
Yeah. I know you asked earlier if things are busier. They're definitely busier here. We see about 25,000 people a year. And so the numbers are definitely growing right now. I will say I wish we had more people who are worried about their kids reaching out with their kids. I feel like more adults are coming forward, and maybe it's the adults needing to take care of themselves before they can really focus on kids needing help. But we're definitely busy, and we're really accessible through Zoom. We've used Zoom for the last 4 years, so it's not new to us, and have been doing telephonic therapy as well. So those are all good things about the pandemic. In some respects, less travel time, less need to go to a building for things. So
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening in on, you know, suicide prevention, and Laurie for being here today to give us some really great information on what are some myths and how to really access help, and that there is a lot of help. Whoever you are, you know, this is impacting us in many different ways. You know, so thank you, guys. Thank you to all of our listeners for checking in with us today.
Bye now.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Don't forget to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, our YouTube channel. Go subscribe. And again, thanks again, Laurie, for checking in or for talking with us today.